Hello Carmel members, welcome back to another edition of Carmel Golf Academy TV. I'm Jason Sutton. I'm here with special guest Dave Neville from Vokey Wedges, Titleist, and we're happy to talk a little bit of wedge fitting today with the man from Titleist Vokey Wedges. So thanks for coming on the show.
No problem.
And sharing some knowledge with the members. First thing, I think the obvious question is, why should an average golfer get fit, and the importance of getting fit for their wedges, and why shouldn't they just buy it off the rack?
Yeah, wedge fitting is critical because those are your scoring clubs, and Bob Vokey gives an example of most average golfers are hitting maybe 6 or 7 greens around if they're having a good round. So now you've got 12 opportunities to get up and down. A tour pro might hit 12 or 13 greens if they're having a good day, and they tend to get up and down all the time. The other thing is, to be good with your wedges, you don't have to hit the ball 300 yards. You don't have to be 6'4", 250. For shots that are under 100 yards, you can get good at that no matter what your body type is. So the advantage of getting wedge fit is you have the right wedges for the game, and it's going to help your scoring immediately.
Absolutely, that's great advice. When we're talking about wedge fitting, we hear a lot of terms that often can be confusing for the average golfer, like bounce and grind and what kind of grooves and shaft flex and all this stuff. Tell us a little bit about those terms and how they can help the golfer and what they mean.
Yeah, I think the question we get the most is, what is bounce? I mean, it's probably the most misunderstood thing relating to wedges and wedge fitting. So I've got a Vokey wedge here. I've got our 5809 here that you can see. And so what bounce is it's actually the angle between the front, the leading edge, and the trailing edge. That's the measured bounce angle. And you can see that it's actually lower in the back than it is in the front. And what that allows the club to do is it keeps the club from digging. So the more bounce you have, the more it keeps it from digging. And Bob always says, bounce is your friend, because bounce provides forgiveness on clubs. And we had this trend where a lot of people were using very low bounce wedges for a long time because they thought, oh, the better players use low bounce. But actually, more bounce can provide the forgiveness. Now, here's an interesting thing. Bounce, when we put the bounce number, you see this says 5809, and you guys can see that.
I was going to ask you about effective bounce.
Yeah, effective bounce versus measured bounce. So
Yeah.
measured bounce is the angle between the leading edge and the trailing edge, but what you can see here, and hopefully you guys can see as well, there's a grind on here. So actually some of the bounce is relieved off the back and the heel. So when we mark a wedge and we say this is 5809, that's the effective bounce, which means how the wedge will play. You're holding a 5812, which is our M grind. That means that's going to play as a high bounce wedge. Okay. So this says 5809. Well, the actual measured bounce might be slightly higher, but because we have a grind, because we've relieved the sole, it's going to effectively play lower. And so we get a lot of questions of how do you come up with the effective bounce number? Well, it's a little bit more art than science, but Bob works with PGA Tour players all around the world, as well as consumers, very good amateurs. We bring them in. We have them hit ones with different bounce angles, and we say, how does this wedge play? Does it play high? Does it play low? Does it play medium? And we slot it in from there, and then we put the effective bounce. And we're, I think, the only company that does that. So when you're out getting fit and looking for wedges, look for the number and look for the effective bounce. Right. Another thing to think about is for sand wedges, you might have higher effective bounces because they have to get you out of the bunker versus your 60. So our mid bounce 54 and 56 are 11 degrees of bounce, but your mid bounce in the 58 is 5809, and your mid bounce in the 60 is 6007.
So would you say that most average golfers need more bounce rather than less?
Most need more bounce, and particularly in the sand wedge, we see a lot of players who don't have enough bounce. The sand wedge is your get out of jail club. You need to make sure it works on full shots, but you have to take it into the bunker and make sure that it has enough bounce to get you out. I mean, if you have one that works great in the fairway but doesn't get you out of the bunker, is it really an effective sand wedge?
Definitely. Too one-dimensional for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
I see that a lot. So tell us a little bit about grooves. I know the groove rule came into effect not long ago, and a lot of people have questions about that we get. So tell us a little bit.
Yeah, probably the second most popular question is what's going on with the grooves and the groove rule, and basically the change that the USGA had us make is the grooves are not quite as sharp as they were before. And you used to see a lot of balls spinning off the greens, a lot of You know, Pro V1 covers getting cut up on grooves, so I had to actually put a little bit of a radius in there, so it's not quite as sharp. Now, when we originally, the groove rule changed, we lost about 3,500 RPM on a 60-degree wedge shot, which is a lot.
Yeah.
Out of the rough. With our new SM4 grooves, we went to a new groove pattern, so we actually have 17 grooves. You can see there's 17 in there versus 14. I'll show that to the camera. So they're a little bit closer together, a little bit more narrow, and we actually got a good bunch of that spin back. We got up to 1,200 RPM of the 3,000 RPM that we lost. So we got a lot of the trajectory issues back. You know, we got a little bit more control out of the rough as well.
Do you see a lot, as far as, I think another question we get a lot of times is how often should we change wedges?
Yeah.
I know not as often as the tour players,
Right.
but can really grooves wear out?
Yeah, grooves do wear out, and we see this a lot when we're doing wedge fittings. I've done a ton of wedge fittings over the past year, and a guy will come in and say, my grooves are worn out, I can't spin the ball, you know, why can't I spin it? And then they show me the groove pattern, and the face is like concave and totally smooth.
Yeah.
And you give them a brand new wedge, and you put it with the Pro V1, and suddenly, oh, I can spin it, this is a miracle.
Yeah.
No, well, grooves wear out because you use your wedges a lot more than you might use a 6-iron or a 4-iron. You're using them on every hole, every shot, and people practice with them a lot. So a good rule of thumb is if you're playing once a week, the grooves are going to start to wear after about 1.5 to 2 years. So I would say about 70 rounds of golf, depending on how much you practice. If you're a person who's practicing every week, you're in the bunker, they're going to wear quicker. Now, one thing that we did with the SM4 is we actually have a heat treat process in the hitting area that makes the grooves last a lot longer. They're going to last about 600 shots longer on bunker shots and shots out of the rough than our previous generation wedges. So that does help, you know, keep the spin up. But you know, with irons, people might replace them every 5 or 6 years, and they're kind of fine. Wedges, you cannot wait 5 or 6 years. You need to go get fit. You need to get into the new wedges probably every 2 years.
Friction is a pretty big deal, right?
Oh, it's huge. It's huge.
Everybody wants to spin the ball.
Everybody wants to spin the ball, and when you get, you know, you're at Carmel, you're around the greens, you got the Bermuda rough, you're hitting it out of there, you want to be able to control. When you start to lose spin, you start to lose distance control, closeness, proximity to the pin, you know, and so an old wedge might be 10, 12 feet further away than a brand new wedge, and that's the difference between missing the putt and making the putt.
Absolutely. Great information. I mean, thanks so much for being on the show. I mean, this is fabulous information. We've got all these wedges that we could help fit you guys. If you want to come down, check it out. Please don't just go grab a wedge out of the shop. Let us help you. Let us see how it's interacting with the turf. I mean, there's a lot of things that we look at, and it's really going to make a big difference in your wedge game, in your short game, and your scores. So thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time on Carmel Golf Academy TV.
Thanks.
Great job.